That allegedly apolitical generation, Gen Z, is making its mark on Indian politics. Call them cockroaches and they will weaponize that, take their messages online and hit the streets. We examine the coverage of that story.
Speaking to you.
Too busy declaring victory to take questions. The Pentagon walls off reporters, denies them access to the truth over what is really happening in Iran. Plus, the visualization of climate change, the images that fail audiences and sell an existential story short. India's capital, New Delhi, has been rocked by some of the country's biggest student protests in years. Up to 50,000 people on the streets, frustrated and demanding to be heard. A new online movement born out of satire has grown into an unlikely political force, the Cockroach Janta Party, or CJP. Whether the authorities fear this movement or simply want to crush it, the response has been forceful. Tear gas, beatings, and the arrest of opposition politicians who joined the demonstrations. But the clashes are only part of the story. Much of India's mainstream television news has focused on the disorder rather than the grievances behind it. Into that gap in the coverage have stepped alternative digital outlets, online creators. Protests sparked by a series of university exam scandals have grown into something much larger, a generational expression of anger over jobs, opportunity, and a belief that the state and the BJP government does not have the people's backs. Social media has a knack for taking a complicated news story like the political unrest in India and boiling it down to the basics. Like this post, a play on ancient Rome, the emperor who fiddled while the city burned. And Narendra Modi, a politician usually active on social media, where he has carefully cultivated his image, who waited 3 full days before weighing in on what is happening on the streets of New Delhi.
A prime minister who's never given press conferences, who always seems so well manicured, so well put together, but never accessible. And you take images of the city burning, students being beaten, and you put them together, and it travels because the facade that Modi has created for all these years is beginning to crack.
This has happened in the past. There were deadly riots in Delhi during COVID, and Modi was hosting a lavish reception for Donald Trump. So he has a record of doing his own thing while things around him fall apart, because he wants to create an alternative reality and inhabit that reality, and that's exactly what he's doing.
The protests have lasted for more than 2 months, driven by the recurring problem of exam leaks in India and the subsequent rise of a new political movement online, the Cockroach Janta Party, the CJP. India has a hyper-competitive education system. Millions vie for relatively few university placements or government jobs. They can study for years for those exams, which repeatedly get stolen, sold, and circulated online, causing millions of exam results to get canceled, setting frustrated students back. More than 2 million young Indians went through that in early May. Then, when a Supreme Court judge called unemployed youths cockroaches, the CJP was born online, an initially satirical movement that quickly turned into a serious player. The mainstream media's coverage of the resulting unrest has focused more on the effect than the cause, the flashpoints between protesters and police, rather than what brought the protesters onto the streets in the first place.
I think the intentions of these, I have no other phrase for it, rent a penny anarchists are out in the open. धर्मेंद्र प्रधान तो बहाना है, इनको देश जलाना है.
This is an issue about examination leaks because so many people are affected by it. Under 30s are 50% of the population today, and 65% of India's population is under 35. So it's young people feeling that the system has closed for them.
This is a case of corruption that has touched people, because this is not money corruption. This is not even a loot. It is playing with the future of young India. You can understand the scale of the problem. 70 paper leaks that we know of in the last 7 years. Almost every family might have been touched at some point of time. And with no explanation, assurance coming from the government, somewhere something broke on this matter.
I still think the mainstream media and the government haven't lost the narrative. So we are talking about the violence, but the key issue, which is the national education policy, is gone off. The talking point is no longer about the core issues affecting young people, which is structural, political. What we are really discussing now is the spectacle. So the state and the mainstream media still in some ways control the narrative.
Which Narendra Modi's BJP government is well positioned to do in a media landscape with almost 400 24/7 news channels, virtually all of which are in Modi's corner.
क्या ये जो लोग आप देख रहे हैं अपनी स्क्रीन पर, ये छात्र हैं? क्या ये नीट की परीक्षा की तैयारी करने वाले छात्र हैं जो यहाँ पर पत्थरबाजी करने के लिए आए हैं?
The BJP's critics have a term for those channels, Godi media, which roughly translates to lapdogs. Those outlets have various compelling reasons for being loyal to the BJP, starting with the Prime Minister's Hindu nationalist agenda, which attracts viewers, boosts ratings, in a country where 80% of the people, roughly 1 billion of them, are Hindus. Media owners also tend to run diverse conglomerates that do a lot of business with the government, and many of their news organizations are reliant on that government for advertising revenues. In its manifesto, the CJP has called for the cancelling of the Godi media. Journalists from those outlets covering the demonstrations have been subject to multiple disturbing, violent attacks by protesters, and they are routinely called out for the kind of reporting they are putting out.
Please remember, this is 12 years of mainstream Godi media that has been ruling the roost, trying to peddle this whole theory that there was stone pelting on part of the Cockroach Janta Party, which led to the police atrocities that happened. That is the government spin that these channels are doing. Those same channel reporters, when they will land up at a Cockroach Janta Party protest, how are people supposed to react to that?
10 मिनट से सुन रहा हूं मैं, पूरा झूठ नैरेटिव फैला रही है वो औरत, NDTV.
They will heckle you. They will call you names. There are better ways to sell your soul than to work for a mainstream media house and peddle lies.
I am always wary of blaming the working journalist who has to survive in an organization, who may have a family to feed. Look at the business interests that control that media. What are their interests? To dub the entire mainstream media in India as compromise, I don't buy that. It is not fair to dub the mainstream media with one brush.
It's the playbook that's been in place for about over a decade, where you take legitimate dissent, legitimate criticism, and turn it into an act of terror.
छात्रों की मांग उठाने के लिए क्या हिंसा की जरूरत है या फिर पत्थर मारना जरूरी इसलिए है क्योंकि दरअसल सारा खेल ही सियासी है.
Arnab Goswami in some ways pioneered this, just as Modi was coming into power in 2014.
Why do we give these anti-nationals such a long rope? Why do they have to get away every time?
It's a well-honed strategy of identifying any kind of dissent as anti-national, dehumanizing them, and reducing them to nothing more than nuisance as a way to take away legitimate criticism.
The coverage in the alternative media space, YouTubers, podcasters, provides a constant contrast with what's on the mainstream side. Those independent journalists are much more in tune with the social media space and do not face the kind of hostility conventional correspondents do. The CJP has more followers on Instagram, 25 million, than the BJP does, and it surpassed the governing party in less than a week. Its leaders are now demanding the resignation of the education minister and compensation for the students' families. We asked the BJP to comment, which it declined to do on what it called an evolving situation. You can bet, however, that the party is watching the rise of the CJP closely and asking the same question so many Indians are. How far can this new movement go? Can an online crusade born out of satire grow, evolve into a political party? And if it does, is there a pathway there to power in India?
there was a rage that had accumulated across India, and the worst casualties were the young. And Modi isn't really a novel phenomenon. His worst actions are really imitations of what came before him. So Modi represents a continuum of sorts. And so this party may yet produce an organic home for India's disenchanted young.
I didn't think that it would have this kind of echo, generate this kind of support, because what my little political thinking told me is that this online traction, 22 million followers in such a short point of time, this is a gold mine. But what they need to do is be better organized, to have more party leaders. And if you check mainstream media, they completely misjudged it. From day one, they have been constantly underestimating the echo this party has been generating.
These are a generation of young people who were very young when Modi came to power. The only world they know is a world in which you have news is rhetoric. The only ecosystem that they know is an ecosystem filled with hate and disinformation. It's not that Gen Z is apolitical, it's just that we are nihilistic. It's that we believe that the end of the world is possible, but we don't think end of BJP is possible. That's because we've not given them the news or the capacity to reimagine a better world. So that is the world that we are in.
If you're struggling to separate fact from fictional messaging in the U.S. war with Iran, you've got plenty of company. For months now, the White House has been insisting that Iran's military capabilities have been obliterated. Yet this war grinds on. And journalists out to question the Pentagon are not getting the access they need to do that. For more on this story, Meenakshi Ravi.
For decades, Pentagon press briefings allowed reporters to question the officials running America's wars. Since the war with Iran began, that access has all but disappeared. The last full Pentagon briefing was about 3 months ago. Since then, updates have come mainly through written statements and social media posts, letting officials control the narrative without troublesome follow-up questions. The pressure on journalists has also tightened. Last week, Secretary of War Pete Hegseth announced a joint Pentagon Justice Department task force to identify and prosecute officials accused of leaking information to the press.
The security of our nation cannot be a bargaining chip for those who seek momentary headlines.
That announcement came as reporting by the New York Times and Washington Post challenged key elements of the administration's narrative, revealing previously undisclosed Iranian attacks, higher U.S. casualties, raising questions about the true cost of the war. Pete Hegseth has put that cost at around $40 billion. Independent analysts say it is likely far higher. The gap between the administration's account and the reality of the war has grown so wide that even some of its traditional media allies have begun asking difficult questions.
But I don't understand how it's possible that Iran has the capabilities to fight this way, because the U.S. has obliterated Iran's military, and the president continues to reiterate that.
We put a series of questions to the Pentagon about that. Its response? The Department of War and U.S. Central Command has consistently provided comprehensive, real-time updates to the world on the United States' operations in Iran. Questions from fake news reporters do very little to inform the public at all. The Pentagon went on to say that the primary goal of critical news outlets is not to inform the public. It's to get clips online to promote themselves.
Over the past 3 months, Europe has been sweltering through record-breaking temperatures. But the news coverage of this story has an image problem, specifically the way that images are being used. News outlets have a tendency, when visualizing reports about extreme heat, to use shots of beaches or city fountains to do that, even as thousands of people are dying, and scientists are warning us of worse to come. Those pictures do tell another story, though, about climate journalism itself. Researchers and media critics say that too much reporting still treats extreme weather as a seasonal thing, failing to connect it to the science, the fossil fuels, and the climate crisis driving it. As Europe confronts a new environmental reality, many newsrooms are still struggling to tell that story with the urgency and imagery that it demands. The Listening Post's Ryan Coles now on the disconnect between the pictures on our screens and the climate story behind them.
The record-breaking heat waves that have swept through Europe this summer have taken the lives of more than 14,000 people, according to the news outlet Politico. But switch on the news in almost any European country, and you'd hardly get a sense of the emergency from the visuals you see.
quoi ci si genera un po'.
On profite là de quelques jours pour récupérer en attendant la prochaine vague de chaleur.
It's brilliant, it's lovely, you know, got a few drinks, a few nibbles.
Refreshing drinks, sunbathers, swimmers, the pictures do not convey the severity of the moment Europe finds itself in.
We're seeing these unprecedented heat waves across Europe, and the media reporting of those heat waves often shows visuals showing fun in the sun, people at the beach having a good time, high days and holidays.
The water at London's Teddington Lock is how these people want to beat the heat.
And what that doesn't communicate is the risks of heat waves. Heat waves are a public health emergency. And often we're seeing text that is what we call negatively valenced, shows the risks of heat waves, the things we need to do to adapt and protect ourselves, keep ourselves safe, alongside these positively valenced visuals. And public engagement research shows that when people see these divergent narratives of visuals saying one thing and text saying another, that they're less concerned about heat waves.
So for a long time, I've tried to cover climate change in a way that I find interesting. And it's been really hard, even as someone who knows that you try to find new angles and new stories, because when you sit down and you write a piece or you produce a package, you then try to find images for that. And even if you have the vast archive like AFP or Getty or AP photo archives, it's really hard to just figure out which are the best images that will work for a heat story. So climate change is famously hard to apprehend visually, just because it's, as a concept, really hard to understand. Like, what is the best issue of climate change? Is it the CEO of Saudi Aramco? Is it a meat factory? Is it people dying in the heat?
Finding the right pictures to illustrate climate change has never been easy. Much of Europe's media has settled on a familiar visual language, the imagery of Euro summer. Beaches, cafe terraces, and city fountains, the same pictures that flood social media every northern summer. Europe itself has changed. The Mediterranean region is warming around 20% faster than the global average, while Europe has become the world's fastest warming continent. But coverage of extreme heat still looks very different elsewhere in the world.
Urban and rural poor communities are also disproportionately affected because of poor housing conditions and limited access to cooling.
For decades, the impact of the climate's breakdown was framed as a crisis happening elsewhere, with Europe seen as largely insulated from its worst effects. Now, heat waves are a reality Europe has to confront too, and the media's telling of the story has failed to catch up.
When we look at heatwave visual coverage across North America, Europe, even Australia, it might seem that those fun in the sun visuals are, inevitable. But that's not the case if we look at other places in the world, particularly in the global south. For example, if we look to the Indian subcontinent and how they're reporting on heat waves, we do see people suffering in the heat.
Many describing the heat as exhausting and dangerous.
Those visuals are really clear there. And we also see pictures of people starting to adapt to extreme temperatures. So both those types of visuals are really important for media coverage. It's not a pre-existing conclusion that we have to rush to fun in the sun.
Climate change is not being told in a way that feels urgent or feels dangerous. Across the board, I would say this happens in print, or it happens online, happens in radio, happens in broadcasting. And this heat wave in particular has been covered in this Euro summer idea of people having fun in the sun. Because Europeans have a different relationship to heat, I would argue, than the rest of the world. You don't see fun in the sun as a trending issue in visuals when you cover climate change in South Asia or in Brazil in the same way.
In the past, climate change was always seen either as a future problem or a problem that didn't affect people in temperate places like Europe. It was more, something that was happening in tropical countries in sub-Saharan Africa or Asia and would happen in the future. We know it's here now, but I think the media in general still does have some catching up to do in terms of recognising it as a problem right here, right now, something directly connected to fossil fuels and something that needs urgent action to solve.
That urgency is often missing altogether in the news coverage.
Chaleur exceptionnelle. Non, c'est pas une chaleur exceptionnelle.
As France baked under record temperatures, one of the country's highest-rated news channels, billionaire-owned CNews, waved the heat away as nothing unusual. A day later, a presenter on rival broadcaster RMC, also owned by a billionaire, had his own take.
Il fait chaud, basta.
D'accord, eh ben écoutez, il y a Marina qui va vous répondre.
Et tu mets un t-shirt.
D'accord, bah oui, bah enfin, alors
T'arrêtes de chouiner.
That's not just trivializing one hot week, it's obscuring the bigger climate story. In Britain, the watchdog Climate News Tracker, which analyzes how broadcasters connect environmental stories to climate science, found the country's major TV and radio networks routinely failed to make that connection. Britain's leading climate scientists have taken notice, writing directly to editors at the country's biggest broadcasters and to media regulators Ofcom and IPSO. Their message was blunt. Too many reports describe climate change impacts without ever naming its cause.
So this statement was sent by some of the most senior climate scientists in the UK, people who've been working on this for decades, and it's a symbol of their frustration. They're in despair. They've been working on warning the world about the dangers of global heating for years and years and years, and yet they're not seeing it taken seriously. And in this case, they don't think that the big broadcasters in the UK are taking it seriously. And I think what they mean by that is that when you talk about heat waves and climate change and record-breaking temperatures, let's name the cause. The cause is the burning of fossil fuels. That's absolutely clear, that's not in doubt.
Literally, you have 60 to 90 companies who are responsible for like 50% of emissions globally.
High Green produces what's called green hydrogen.
But these companies have also for many, many decades sowed doubt and make it really hard for reporters to understand what's happening. If you didn't have the data in front of you, it would also be like a conspiracy theory. You wouldn't believe it that just they've gone to the extent they have to hide the climate science and to make people doubt about climate science.
But there's a more hopeful story hiding in the data. A growing body of peer-reviewed research shows that the overwhelming majority of people around the world, somewhere between 80 and 89%, want their governments to take stronger climate action. That finding gave rise to the 89% Project, a global journalistic collaboration between The Guardian and AFP, built around that little-known statistic. Its aim is to encourage newsrooms to make climate reporting more than a seasonal beat, connecting extreme weather to the science behind it, and treating climate change as a story that shapes the news every day, not just on the hottest days of summer.
News coverage of climate change does go in cyclical ways. It tends to focus on major climate summits and on extreme weather events like floods and fires, for example. And that's to be expected. There's a news hook and there's an obvious story to link to climate change. But climate change is a story beyond those things as well. It's a story about the people and the places, the things that we care about. And there are many of those stories in our everyday lives. And what we really need to see is the news media looking to cover those stories where climate change goes beyond being just an extreme weather event story.
Newsrooms are busy places where you have competing attentions from all beats and all desks. The 89% Project is supporting newsrooms and supporting reporters or pitching to reporters to make it as easy as possible to cover climate change. What I'm seeing is that across the world, people really want to cover climate change. Reporters really understand this is a pressing issue. Editors want to commission stories about this. Just listen to reporters, listen to editors in the grassroots and what they want to do and how they want to cover this topic.
And finally, this past week, New York Mayor Zoran Mamdani delivered a statement that broke the internet.
Benjamin Netanyahu is a war criminal.
In the video, Mamdani answered a basic question. What would he do if Benjamin Netanyahu, wanted by the International Criminal Court over alleged war crimes, came to New York City? Would he arrest the Israeli Prime Minister?
It is clear that we do not have the independent legal authority to enforce this warrant. The federal government, however, does. And I call on them to join the ICC and execute this warrant.
That actually represented a step back for Mamdani, who during his mayoral campaign vowed that if elected, he would arrest Netanyahu. He now acknowledges the jurisdictional limitations of his job, that no city leader has the power to do that. Still, when the mayor of America's biggest city calls for the White House to arrest an Israeli prime minister, that makes news. It gets clicks. And at the time of this recording, that 2.5-minute clip had more than 100 million views on Instagram. generated more than 79 million impressions on X, and had another 27 million views on TikTok. Thanks for watching. Now leave a comment. Let us know what you made of this week's program. If you'd like to follow the show and stay updated, you can find links to our social media channels and our newsletter in the description below.